This is a talk that I'm giving for Intermark Group and the Birmingham YouTube meetup. And it's about why videos go viral. That's the original title, is Why Videos Go Viral. Although, while I was working on it, I came up with an alternate title, which is What Viral Videos Reveal About Human Behavior and Marketing. Because it turns out that viral videos reveal a lot about who we are as humans and what we're interested in as humans and how we get engaged by things as humans. So in this first slide, this first little episode of headlines that tell me what I want to hear, you can find all these headlines in the media that talk about the importance of social media and the decline of traditional forms of media. So if you want to look at how engaged fans are with the Pistons, this article that came up says they're looking at Reddit instead of looking at TV ratings. So actual engagement of these fans, they're turning to social media instead of turning to measures from TV viewership. This other headline says that YouTube could be about to overtake TV as America's most watched platform. So TV is declining, YouTube viewership is increasing, and people are starting to watch YouTube on their TVs now. And this is also an old headline. It comes from 2017, so I would expect that YouTube is continuing to increase while TV has continued to decline. This final headline, Gen Z spends more time on YouTube than Netflix. And this is really interesting now because you're actually comparing two different alternatives to traditional media, Netflix being a streaming service. And so the message here should be of interest to everybody, which is that YouTube isn't going away. YouTube is still a predominant platform. It's used by Gen Z, and people are spending a lot of time on it. So that's encouraging news. And one of the reasons why, the difference between YouTube and Netflix, one of the key differences is that you can interact with people on YouTube. There's this level of engagement, and you don't have that engagement on Netflix. So YouTube is actually a form of social media, and Netflix is not. And one of the main things that people do when they go on YouTube is they start to even when the video starts going on, they just start to scroll down to see all the comments. Now, you take a look at this image. What do you think I'm trying to say here? Social media is... That's right, it's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. That is to say, people can put whatever they want to put out there on social media, and we don't really have... There's not an external sort of force that tries to dictate what gets popular. What gets popular is driven by the engagement that people have with what people are posting on social media. And so whatever instinctually and innately draws our attention is going to rise to the top. This means that we see a lot of really interesting stuff, and that's what we're here to talk about, viral videos. So in this slide, I've got a bunch of different viral videos. And if you're watching this, I might not be showing them because of YouTube kind of copyright restrictions stuff. But I'll put some links to many of the viral videos that we'll be talking about below, so you could check below for that. But you got the Coke and Mentos guys. These guys put a bunch of Mentos and a bunch of Cokes, and they recorded it. Got Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style is a very compelling, just visually compelling dance that this guy's doing. It's very intriguing. And it's never something that could have become popular by approaching record executives or music industry people. He's not super young. He's not super attractive. It's a weird dance. They wouldn't say, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Like, let's make this the big thing. But it happened organically. It happened by people's engagement with the video. So with Zanga Zanga, Zanga Zanga came out during a time that was later called the Arab Spring in North Africa. And Muammar Gaddafi, he went on TV to try to attack his dissenters and discourage dissent. And when Noy Alouche saw him on TV and he saw the movement that he made, he immediately thought of the club dance scene. He thought it could fit within a club dance, and so he overlaid the video of that with club music. And then he named it Zanga Zanga, and he shared it on social media accounts, mostly with revolutionaries in the Arab world. And it took off. They were playing it at nightclubs. They made it into a ringtone, and they sold 60,000 ringtones in the first week just in Israel. And this is all from the book Videocracy if you want to read more about that. So in Libya, where Gaddafi was from, it actually went viral, but it became viral in the physical world because there were internet blackouts and YouTube was blocked. So people were burning CDs of it and basically copying it physically instead of the traditional way of going viral on social media. But it was an anti-regime anthem. It basically mocked the leader. So the clip carried a lot of cultural significance. And this is sort of the power of art. It's the power of the freedom of media, is that society can collectively process things and communicate with each other in a way that's not super logical and super direct, but a message somehow gets through and they sort of sync up with each other and connect with each other. And oddly enough, that's what happened with Nyan Cat too. It's basically this little cat on a Pop-Tart with a little rainbow. I guess maybe it's pooping out a rainbow or something. But there's also this kind of strange music, this kind of 8-bit music going on in the background of Nyan Cat too. And people did the same thing. People got very interactive with this. There's like really long, there's like 5-minute version of it on YouTube. There's like an hour-long version of it on YouTube where you're just watching this same cat with the same video. And people took it and they overlaid all these different backdrops on it. They put different like flags and different images and different symbols. And basically they were communicating with each other and they were creating art. And so the viral video story is that people are creating art, but there's not like an individual sole person that creates it and calls it a done deal. It's an evolving form of art that almost sometimes doesn't even have an originator. You know, it's like a collaborative effort across people all over the world in this sort of art conversation that they're having with each other. Now, the first YouTube video that got 1 million views was of Ronaldinho. It's a Nike ad where he puts on these shoes and then he goes and kicks the ball, and he kicks the ball against the goalpost and it goes right back at him. And then he does it 2 more times. And that is an authentic, real video, and it really gets our attention. And it gets our attention because we wondered if it was fake or not. And so in some sense, when Nike did this, they were leveraging the notion that people were going to talk about it. There was going to be word of mouth, because they had to watch it and try to figure out if it could be fake. Like, how could they have faked it? And that human curiosity can drive people to be engaged with something. Devil Baby Attack also leverages our surprise. You know, people, they see a stroller on the street. There's nobody around. They're like, what's going on? They come up and then there's this devil baby that comes up out of it. So there's a lot of shock. There's a lot of surprise. And we see people's genuine reactions in this video. And then Rebecca Black is a really interesting story of a viral video for me. And it basically like went popular because it was sort of like kind of a bad song and a cheesy performance. You know, it didn't get viral. It basically got viral for being bad. And sometimes that can be okay. And I'll talk later about how she leveraged the attention that she got from Friday to become a really popular, really powerful musician today, right now. So social media is the largest social experiment. Now, if you think about, like, in the history of humans, we've never been able to see what we innately and instinctually care about and how we engage with each other at the level that we can do that on social media. And a lot of the principles about how we engage at the most basic levels are related to how we engage on social media. So, you know, I think a lot of times we bring in this really negative attention, this really negative perspective of this social media platform, I don't like it. And that's it. That's the end of the story. But there are ways to construct your experience on social media to be purposeful about it, to try to engage with it in a more healthy way. And in my view, like, I would like to think that that's what I'm trying to do here with this talk. In my view, it's to understand how it taps into some of these fundamental human characteristics about how we engage with each other and about how we like to be social with each other. And so the story, what I'll be talking about later too, and this is like the whole story of why viral videos become viral. The whole story is that it's like a modern day sideshow. So the thing of people just walking along on the street and being compelled to pay attention to somebody who's doing something out of the norm, the thing that gets our attention in that scenario is the same thing that gets our attention in social media. And this notion of being on the street and noticing something that gets our attention that's beyond the norm, like essentially what's happening is that it gets our attention because it deviates from what we expect. It gets our attention because it deviates from other people. But when we actually pay attention and we actually observe it, we recognize ourselves in it. We recognize a piece of ourself and a piece of humanity in that media, in the video. So the whole thing about social media is it creates a scenario where there's no more gatekeepers. Now, in the world of gatekeepers, this was the world of television and radio, for example. There's still gatekeepers in today's society. There's still, even on social media, there's sort of gatekeepers. But I won't get into that in too much detail. But basically, the story behind radio and TV, the whole notion is that there's a restriction in the amount of information that you could put out there. There's a limited amount of TV channels and a limited amount of time on the stations. And so what they put on there has to be determined in advance. And that means that there's somebody at the very top that's making these decisions about what goes on there. And that person is the gatekeeper. And so I encourage, because we live in a world without gatekeepers in the sense of on social media, anybody could put out whatever they want to put out. Because we live in that world, I think it's really important to have a perspective, to come from this perspective that there are no more gatekeepers. Like there really are. I think that humans are fundamentally drawn to having sort of gatekeepers at some level. Like we're fundamentally drawn to create hierarchies and to try to elevate certain people and the opinions that that person has so that other people need to be validated by them for them to be validated by a larger group. And there's some advantages of that. There's reasons why we are attracted to that. It makes decisions easier, and there's basically like ancient wisdom in doing that. But the notion of no more gatekeepers is empowering. It can feel empowering, and anybody can put their opinions and beliefs on social media. They can put their art on social media and so on, and potentially interact with others based on it. And that's very empowering. So the whole thing, when you think about the media that's powerful on television and the media that's powerful on the internet and social media, there's a lot of differences. And the media is shaped based on the behavior that we seek from the person who's using it. So the differences between television and the differences between social media, the difference in the content that you see on them is shaped by the behavior that we want that person to do when they're watching those videos and so on, when they're engaged in it. Now, when you watch TV, you're actually incentivized, the TV company is incentivized to get you to sit there on the couch and to not change the channel. Because their model is based on showing advertisements. It's like a certain amount of TV show and then a certain amount of ads with a commercial break. So the entire structure of television is driven to influence that aspect of human behavior. Now, that aspect of human behavior is completely different from the human behavior that we need to make viral videos and to make things happen on the internet. And that is, you need people to share things with each other. Right? So if you're watching TV, the action of clicking on the remote is actually the action that we don't want to have happen. But clicking on something, usually like clicking on a like button or a share button, is exactly what we want to happen on social media. And what television does in order to make this behavior happen, in order to basically make us stick to the couch, is they create all these rapid edits. And every time they change the perspective or change something in the scene, introduce something new in the scene and so on, jump cuts, all these different cuts, they engage a part of our brain that tries to understand new things that happen. So every time something changes in the environment, there's a specific brain process that gets engaged that tries to understand what that was. And television constantly tries to engage this process of the brain. And it actually gets tiring, and that actually lowers our heart rate, and repeatedly engaging that aspect of the brain basically gives us this sort of couch syndrome where we just sit there and we don't really do anything. And that's not the story of engagement on social media is the exact opposite. You don't want those artificial productions. You don't want the actors. You don't want the jump cuts. You don't want the sound effects. You want it to be as authentic as possible. So, going back to this notion of gatekeepers in the early stages of television, when you have gatekeepers, this is an idea that I've been thinking about. When you have gatekeepers, you have to create these rules of engagement. You have to create these sort of norms and these ways that people are supposed to behave that indicates that they belong on that platform. And I think this is just an interesting aspect of human behavior. So if you think about it, imagine that you're tasked with going out on the street corner and selling a newspaper. How would you go out on the street corner and sell a newspaper? You'd say, extra, extra, read all about it. And so back in the days, this is an actual video where a kid was doing that. Back in the days, when they wanted to sell a newspaper, they didn't genuinely ask, how can I sell a newspaper? And think about it and think about the people that were walking by. They just had a blanket thing that they were supposed to do. And the people who are walking by are like, that's what the person who sells a newspaper does. They say these very specific words. And if you want to sell programs, they say, programs, get your programs. Well, why do they say that? If you're tasked with selling a program and you have to decide what you're going to say, why is what you're going to say prescripted by what everybody else has said for almost 100 years, going on 100 years now with some of these mediums? And what you're supposed to say when you sell these things hasn't changed so much that we know what you're supposed to say. Why would that be? Another really interesting example of how we just develop these very specific ways of behaving and communicating that aren't necessarily grounded in a direct engagement with people. And again, this is contrasting the gatekeeper and the no gatekeeper model, and the notion that when you have gatekeepers, you have to create things that generate effort for those people so that if they overcome that effort, then they basically kind of pass through the gate. But that effort isn't actually something that's useful in any sort of broad human, authentic humanity perspective. So this really interesting thing happened with old movies where they started talking in a very specific way.
Listen, Walter. Listen, I made a great reporter out of you, Hildy, but you won't be half as good on any other paper, and you know it. We're a team, that's what we are. You need me and I need...
And it was called the transatlantic accent. Now, the transatlantic accent was driven, interestingly enough, it was driven by the way that you're supposed to talk on the radio. So because of the way that the radio filtered out sound, people had to emphasize different aspects of sounds more than others. So they actually developed an accent that was optimized for the technology at the time. And so obviously if you're using that medium, if you're on the radio, then you get really good at talking that way. And now when people perceive it, they judge you as a person who must be good at being on the radio or being on TV because you talk the way you're supposed to talk. But there's not inherently a reason why it would occur. And another interesting thing about the transatlantic accent is that it wasn't an accent that happened normally through development. Typically, accents happen at an early age when children hear people talking that way and they develop them naturally. You actually had to read books and make effort to talk this way. So going further, this is just something that is very fascinating to me. this notion that you have to behave a different way for a form of media. This notion that I'm selling newspapers, so there's a very specific thing I'm supposed to say to sell newspapers. Or I'm selling programs, so in order to do that, I need to say programs, get your programs, and there's a very specific way that you say it. But there's no basis for that. There's no reason why you should be doing that. But we just learn it. And TED Talks is one of those examples to me where people have this very structured way that they're supposed to talk when they give a TED Talk. It's like fancy. It's supposed to sound smart and fancy and things like that. And again, I want to point out that it's this mentality is not doing anybody any good, at least in terms of viral videos, at least in terms of engaging people. So I looked through this book, The Viral Video Manifesto, and it's a very good book to talk about the characteristics that help contribute to making a video go viral. And they talk about two key characteristics, which is, they talk about four, actually, and I lumped two of them together, authenticity and humanity. Because, and I tried to think, like, what's the difference between authenticity and humanity? And I'll get that across. The first example video I'll show is the JK wedding entrance dance. And so what happens here is that we see people entering for a wedding. It's kind of going the way that you expect. And then they throw their things out and then they start dancing. And so let's just take a look. This is a video that just immediately caught on and was shared by everybody. And a lot of people know this one. So you can see that, this video went viral, but the production quality is not super great. So the authenticity here is that is based on the camera, the things I mentioned earlier. It's a continuous shoot. There's no jumps, there's no cuts, there's no edits, there's no sound effects. It's not super high quality. There's no actors. And that's the humanity part. There's no actors, so these people are acting real and their reactions are all real. And that's very powerful to see. And this has actually changed the way that information is shared as a society. So here the Green Bay Packers are celebrating a win. This is not from last weekend when the 49ers beat them and went on to the Super Bowl, obviously. But, everybody loves these sports stars, and to get to see them in their authentic reaction, basically with a low-budget phone and them acting real, is super powerful, is super engaging. And so this is one of the most popular tweets of all time. All it is a selfie that Ellen took. And it's just all of these actors that are together at the same time. It's at, it's at the Oscars. And so you just see all these famous actors because it's an authentic video, because it's an authentic picture, just a selfie taken by them at the Oscars, it's not super high production. There's a lot of humanity in that. And we're seeing all these people just how they normally act. And we kind of understand that, they're just hanging out together. So authenticity in humanity is a big piece. And one of the big components is this, what they say in their book is at the end of your stunt, you've always got to do one of these things. You got to raise your arms in victory. That's a very important piece of their viral video. And this is a fundamental piece of human behavior. Like across all cultures, when we celebrate in victory, we tend to get taller. We tend to puff out our chests and so on. And so humans will instinctually raise up their arms in victory. And even people who are blind, who've never seen anybody do this before, they know how to do it. So it's a very fundamental part of human species to act this way. And when we can see it, we understand the happiness that they feel from successfully mixing a bunch of Mentos in Coke cans, in Coke bottles. So this is another one that you guys have probably heard of, like just very simple circumstances of a child who finds out that they're going to go on a surprise trip to Disneyland, like just filming somebody's reaction to a piece of news that's exciting and seeing their genuine response. You've probably seen this image of Chloe before. This facial expression that she's giving is something that's super engaging because she's expressing something that like we've all felt, something really fundamental. Like, why is her sister acting so crazy right now? I just don't understand this. And we can understand what it means to apply this facial expression to a bunch of people that we interact with. So we really understand what's going on in this piece. Another example is the double rainbow. Like, if you just watch this video, you really feel the excitement and this positivity from the guy who sees these double rainbows.
Whoa, that's a full rainbow. All the way. Double rainbow. Oh my God.
So this notion of going from complete sort of inauthenticity of having to learn how to speak for radio and TV with like the transatlantic accent and how to behave on TV and how to create content for TV, to complete authenticity of here's my shaky cell phone video of somebody who's not an actor, highlights something where we can go even further in terms of the imperfections that we can have. And this little segment that I call Ugly Cells, I just started off with this quote by Winston Churchill, where he says, "Sometimes a slight and not unpleasing stammer or impediment has been of some assistance in securing the attention of the audience." So these imperfections in our speakers, like a stammer or an impediment, can actually help get people's attention. And in some sense, it's something that's a little bit unexpected. So this is a little video about how ugly sells by the agency called RPA. And that's kind of their thing. That's what they're really excited about, is just really pushing this idea that ugly sells. And this is Tim Leake, their Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer.
Wait, are you saying ugly is good?
I'm saying it can be.
But it's ugly.
That's what attracts people to it.
But why?
It feels authentic. It resonates with people because it doesn't try that hard.
I don't get it.
Nope. But your audience does.
So in the meme culture, ugly is definitely a characteristic. You know, if you think about some of the personas in the memes, some of the cartoon characters, they're not portrayed with great artistic work. And in these two memes that I highlight here, people just overlay text on them, right? You could just put the text on top of boxes, and it could be different size fonts, they could be different fonts, whatever. It doesn't matter. The whole thing that matters is the idea. So meme culture has embraced this notion that we have reduced the quality that we desire. Instead, people can simply get an idea and express it, and collectively they can basically communicate with each other and explore interesting ideas through memes. So this is taken even more, it's embraced in this notion of brutalist websites. This is a thing, and Pascal Deville is credited with this here, drawing from their website where they actually create these brutalist websites, and they're meant to be imperfect. They're meant to be kind of jagged and not follow the traditional website rules. But they don't look like websites that were made in 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever. So there's sort of an art to ugliness in these websites, but you know, this is a popular trend. It exists. It's a popular thing. So another feature about viral videos is they need to be quick. So you don't want to waste the audience's time trying to set it up or trying to go through, you know, various different things. You really need to get them immediately. And so some of the viral video examples are very brief, you know, just like 5 seconds, 10-second long type of thing. Right? So that's all this one is. It's very short, just a little angry gopher. The panda getting startled by their kid sneezing there. Very short and brief too, right? And it's not wasting our time. So the other rule for viral videos is to be unforgettable. So just think back, this is audience participation time. Think about what's unforgettable that you've seen, maybe on Twitter or on social media or YouTube. What do you remember? Because that's your brain basically filtering out things that are forgettable and only keeping things that are unforgettable, and then we can ask why that is. So in terms of being unforgettable, this again is where we get back to the old rules of how people are engaged and influenced in society. And in the Viral Video Manifesto, they talk about this as a sideshow. So if you can imagine that you've got a video with something and you can say, step right up, see the incredible, fill in the blank. And if filling in the blank makes sense, then you've got a chance to be unforgettable. So an example is the dog riding the skateboard. Another example is the guy jumping into a pair of pants. These are all sideshow tricks and kind of unforgettable. I wish I could wake up in the morning and jump into a pair of pants in a really cool way like that. So think of it as performing on a street corner where every audience member is constantly one step away from walking away. And this is something I'm really interested in because trying to engage people on the street is the most difficult way to engage people. And so if you're trying to engage people while they have no reason to give attention to you, then you know that what you're doing is compelling. And so that's when it's like has a powerful feeling that you feel rewarded for getting their attention when you know that it was a difficult thing to do. And there's an analogy of this with modern day, which is that the first thing to ask yourself when you're creating content is, will this get someone to stop scrolling? If the answer is no, then no other questions matter. If you don't think that people are going to stop scrolling to see what you posted on social media, then stop posting or don't post it, is the sort of message here. But the notion here is the same as the notion of getting people's attention on the street. Like the notion of a sideshow. It's that they're scrolling by, they're seeing all these things, they're busy. And so what are you going to do to keep them from scrolling? And so another tweet from Matthew Kobich, if I'm saying that correctly, he has a really great Twitter game. And he says, you have to create such a remarkable experience that people can't help but share it with their friends. And that's a really important perspective to take on this, is the notion that people have a strong urge to share useful information with their friends. Because when you have useful information and you communicate that to your friends, then you provide value to them. They're giving you their attention because you're giving them something valuable, and their attention is something valuable to you. So when you share useful information with people, you're actually connecting with people. And this is one of the things that we're incentivized to talk about with others. And so when we see these things, that's why we can tell other people, that's why we share these things. The Coke and Mentos story, they shared that with only one person. And this was through an email. And they just shared it through email with all these other people. And that's how viral videos have been too in the past, is that they don't always have to be shared by pressing a share button. They used to get shared by sending them through email before we had social media. And even before that, people used to make newspaper clippings, and they could put the newspaper clipping on the fridge, and that shares it. And people see it when they visit their home. And so we've had ways of sharing before social media came on board. And so the notion of sharing a post on social media is sort of equivalent to somebody deciding to rewrite a book in ancient times or in older times when books were the popular form of media. So Robert Cialdini, in his book Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, he talks about this click-whirr response that people have. And I'd like to call it the shut up and take my money effect. Basically, what this is that there are certain things that when we see them and we get psychologically engaged with them, we don't even make a decision anymore about if we want to make that purchase and so on. We just automatically do. It's yes, just shut up and take my money. And this is a powerful human instinct. That's where you want to be, obviously. You want to be not where you're trying to get other people's business, But you want to be aware, like, it's not a decision. Like, they don't even have another choice. And there are certain instances where this has popped up. So one is the ice bucket challenge. Like, when this came about is very compelling. You see all these social media posts where people are taking ice buckets and pouring them over their head. But when this happens, think about every major business. Think about every celebrity, like Ellen, Jimmy Fallon, all of these people. When these kind of trends come on, these people are the ones who feel this sort of click-whirr response where they're like, well, the ice bucket challenge is the thing, so we need to do it. So the Lance Armstrong bracelets gained into popularity with such a rapid pace, people would just wear them on their wrists and you would see them. I think I would classify this as also a sort of click-whirr response for people, is that, they see everybody else wearing them, they have an opportunity to get one themselves, and then it's like, bam, they're all of a sudden they're just wearing them and they're buying them. And they sold so many of them. And then they killed them. Lance Armstrong killed it. And the degree in which people will gravitate towards you and love you and be all on top of you, they'll turn your back on you just as quickly. So let's look at Friday. Let's think about Friday with Rebecca Black. I mentioned earlier that this video, and I'll post a link to it below. I mentioned earlier that this video is an example of something that went viral for being bad. But it can't just be that it's bad, because it's easy to make things that are bad. You could go into any karaoke and find people performing badly, okay? So thinking a little bit more carefully about Friday. This is the guy who wrote it, Patrice Wilson, and he says, I don't try and make the sounds sound simple and ridiculous. It's just my style of writing. 7 a.m., waking up in the morning, gotta be fresh, gotta go downstairs, gotta have my bowl, gotta have my cereal, gonna see everything, the time is going. So these lyrics are kind of ridiculous. Just a high school student talking about gotta have my bowl, gotta have my cereal. Yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. And but you have to acknowledge that, there's something catchy about that. I would even go so far as to say there's something a little bit charming about that. Now, when you look into Rebecca Black, this is an amazing social experiment. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit of a fan of hers based on my research. So this is 6 months after her viral video. You have somebody who got famous for making a bad video and endured a lot of flack on social media and online. And she actually took it really well. I mean, it was really hard for her. She had to start getting homeschooled. And I imagine that it was somewhat difficult. But in the grand scheme of things, here she is talking with this guy who wrote Videocracy, Kevin Alaka. She talks about how she discovered that her video is starting to go viral. It took like 6 months after she put it out. And then it's very interesting. He says, what should we call your fans? And she has a lot of wisdom in saying that the fans themselves should decide what they're going to call her. I think that's really, really nice. She's not trying to embrace trying to be a star. She's just kind of like acting exactly how you would expect a 8th grader or a high school student to act. And I think that's a part of why she continued to become popular. And so one of the story with Rebecca Black here is that what do you do when you go viral? You have to leverage the attention, and you actually have to be smart about what you're going to do to maintain that, basically that power and the attention that you have. And she's actually doing that. So today in 2020, she's got, this is what came out 2 months ago here. As of this talk, she's got a new music video and it gets a bunch of views. So she has fans. She has over 1 million subscribers, and she's basically a singer. She's in music. So she was able to leverage that power, even though it became popular because it was a bad video. She was able to leverage the attention that she got to become Rebecca Black, the well-known singer in 2020. So this is an example from Crushing It. And it's just that what this guy he had been communicating about his diet and his strategy for being healthy and his eating regimen and all these things. He'd been communicating that on social media, just putting those videos out there on YouTube. And then he got invited to go on an interview on CNN. And he realized, oh my God, I'm going on CNN. I don't have anything to sell. So all these people are going to see me on there. I need to at least have somewhere where they could go and buy something in case they want to. And so he pulled an all-nighter before he went on CNN, created this cookbook with his wife's amazing vegan recipes, and then after he appeared, they made over $100,000 in sales. And so that's the sort of thing that you'd have to be like, oh, okay, I'm getting all this attention, all this traffic for whatever reason. How am I going to leverage that? That's an example. So let's look at some lessons for viral videos, and we're wrapping up right now. So lessons for viral videos. If you're intrigued by one of something, ask yourself what would happen if I had 100 of them. Basically, take something that's interesting with one of it and just multiply that. And that's what these guys did with the Coke and Mentos. And speaking of leveraging your viral video, the Coke and Mentos guys wrote this book. So that's one thing. I bought the book. It's a pretty good book. So they had a plan to leverage that attention. The other point is that you can find something unforgettable by setting up a slightly bizarre situation and catching people in the act of being themselves. So that's really interesting, and that's just a note to humanity. If you're working on something few people have ever tried before, you can become the best in the world in a remarkably short time. This is a really empowering thing. If you create some niche thing that nobody's ever done, you can become the best in the world at that thing. And for 99.9% of people, your best strategy is to develop merely good skills in a variety of compatible fields. I really like this wisdom from Scott Adams, and that's basically what Scott Adams is. You know, he's not the best cartoonist, he's not the funniest person, but he was able to combine his good cartoon work with his good humor and create Dilbert. So even going beyond, this is the last slide. So the notion that because our entertainment, because our media allows us to interact with each other, it allows us to create richer experiences. We can actually engage in a two-way conversation with these people, and collectively, together, we can learn more about the world and then ultimately about ourselves. And by going back to the idea that social media is the largest social experiment, it's a reflection of our collective psyche. So we're seeing aspects of human behavior that we could never observe before in human history. Just the scale at which we interact with each other, the freedom at which we can all be exposed to anything that somebody creates without restrictions, reveals a lot about who we are as people and our humanity. Hit that subscribe if you'd like to see the other videos that we post. We're posting regularly about our psychological ideas and psychological insights. And hit the bell if you want notifications of our posts. Hit the like if you like and the share if you share. And let us know in the comments what your views on this are. Any thoughts that came up to you, what you think about anything we're missing here with what makes videos go viral, any viral videos that I missed talking about and analyzing that you would be interested in. Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for checking this out.